The worst thing about working the night shift isn't the silence. It's the waiting. The endless hours of fluorescent lights humming overhead, the clock ticking louder than it should, and the aisles standing too still like they're just waiting for something to happen. I'd worked at Bill's Market for almost 2 years, small-town grocery store, nothing fancy. Just a few aisles of canned food, cheap beer, and a deli counter that shut down by 8 p.m. sharp. And I was used to the night shift being boring. Until last Thursday. That was the night everything changed. It started with the cameras. I was in the back office, watching the monitors, zoning out like usual. The grainy black and white feeds showed nothing special, just the empty aisles, the glowing exit signs, and the parking lot outside, dead and still under a single flickering street lamp. But then the camera feed for aisle 3 glitched. Just for a second. A quick static flash. And when the picture came back, someone was standing there. Middle of the aisle. Not moving. I leaned closer. The figure wasn't familiar. Tall. Thin. Wearing dark clothes. Their head was down like they were staring at the floor. But I hadn't heard the bell above the door ring. No one had come in. And there were no cars in the parking lot. I switched over to the front door camera. Nothing. The door was still locked. The figure didn't move. I stared at the monitor, my heart beating faster with every second of silence. Then the screen glitched again. And the figure was gone. I told myself it was a glitch. Old cameras. Cheap wiring. I left the office and did a slow walk around the store. The aisles were empty. Everything was in its place. Until I got to aisle 3. That's when I noticed it. A box of cereal spilled across the floor. The same spot where the figure had been standing. The shelf next to it was half empty, like someone had pulled items down in a hurry. But there was no one there. And I didn't hear anyone leave. I tried to shake it off. I went back to the office, closed the door, and tried to focus on the inventory logs. That's when the phone rang. The landline on the desk. The one that never rang at night unless it was the boss calling to check in. I picked it up. Bill's Market, night shift speaking. Silence. Hello? There was a faint crackling on the line. Like someone breathing through static. Then, a whisper. You're not alone. I slammed the phone down. Tried to steady my breathing. It was just a prank. Someone screwing with me. That's what I told myself until it rang again. This time I didn't answer. I let it ring. Until the sound stopped on its own. I checked the cameras again. Aisle 3 was empty. But now on the feed for the break room, the door was slightly open. I hadn't left it open. I crept down the hallway, every fluorescent light overhead buzzing louder than usual. The break room door was ajar. A soft draft blew through, carrying the faint smell of something rotting. I pushed the door open slowly. The lights were off. I reached for the switch, and the moment the light flicked on, my stomach dropped. All the chairs were stacked in the middle of the room. Perfectly balanced. Teetering like a game of Jenga. And on top of the stack, perched neatly, was a security badge. Mine. I was done pretending it was a prank. Someone was in the store. I grabbed the store phone, ready to call the cops. No dial tone. Just static. I checked my cell phone. No signal. I was starting to sweat, every hair on my arm standing on end. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement on the camera feed. The figure was back. Standing in the frozen foods aisle now. But something was different. The shadows around them, they were wrong. Twisting in directions the lights shouldn't allow. And then the worst part. The figure turned toward the camera. And smiled. The figure's smile didn't belong on a human face. It stretched too far, cutting across cheeks that didn't seem to move naturally. The shadows bent around it like gravity didn't apply the same way to whatever it was. And then the screen went black. The camera feed for the frozen food aisle died in an instant. I didn't need to see more. I needed to get the hell out. 1:03 a.m., trapped. I sprinted for the front door, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the buzz of the flickering lights overhead. I reached for the lock, but the door wouldn't budge. I jiggled the key, shoved my shoulder into the glass, but it was like the door had been welded shut. The bell above the door jingled softly. But I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I tried the back door next. Same result. Locked. The emergency exit? The handle was missing. Like it had never been there. I stumbled back to the office, trying to steady my breathing. The cameras were dead now, static on every screen. Except one. Camera 6. The break room. The chairs were still stacked neatly in the middle of the floor, but now. There was something new on top of the pile. A photo. I leaned in closer, squinting at the grainy image. It was me. Not just any photo, though. It was me tonight. Wearing the same shirt. Same tired eyes. Only in the picture I wasn't standing in the break room. I was standing at the front door. Looking out. And behind me, blurry in the shadows, that same smiling figure. The lights in the office flickered once, then died completely. I was swallowed by darkness, the only light now coming from the dim emergency exit sign in the hallway. I reached for my phone. No signal. I turned on the flashlight and froze. There was something on the wall. Writing in thick, greasy strokes smeared across the drywall. You were supposed to stay. The letters were too tall, too uneven, like they'd been written by something that didn't understand human hands. 1:47 a.m. The freezer door opens. The silence in the store was suffocating. No hum from the fridges. No buzzing from the lights. Just nothing. Until I heard it. A soft creak. Metal hinges groaning open. The freezer door. I should have run. But I couldn't. I had to know if it was still here. I crept toward the frozen food aisle, flashlight shaking in my hand. Each step echoed through the empty store, too loud, too sharp. The door was wide open now. Cold air bled out across the linoleum like fog. And on the inside of the door, handprints. Long, narrow fingers pressed against the frost-covered metal. The smudges were fresh, still melting in the warmth of the air, and carved into the frost just below those handprints. I see you. I ran back to the office. Barricaded the door with a chair. I needed a plan. I needed to think. But the moment I sat down, the room went colder. Not just the kind of cold from bad insulation. This was different. Breath on the back of your neck cold. I heard it then. Breathing. Slow. Shallow. Coming from inside the room. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. But then, the static on the cameras flickered back on. And on camera 3, the canned food aisle. The figure was back. But this time it was closer. Facing the camera. Not smiling anymore. Just watching. And then the worst part. I checked the clock on the wall. 2:07 a.m. The timestamp on the camera feed? 2:09 a.m. 2 minutes ahead of the time in the office. The figure wasn't just standing there now. It was standing there 2 minutes from now. Watching me before I even got there. I tried to focus on the screens. Find a pattern. A clue. But something caught my eye on camera 1, the front entrance feed. Someone was at the door. A man. Wearing a uniform. Security? No. Not security. It was me. I stared at the screen, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to break free. On camera 1, there I was standing outside the front door. Same shirt. Same jeans. Same exact expression of confusion I wore now. I blinked hard, trying to convince myself it was a glitch. A loop. A mistake. But then the mark on the screen moved. He looked directly into the camera. And smiled. The air inside the office was too thick, like I was breathing in wet cement. I stumbled back from the monitors, pulse racing, as if distance from the screen could undo the impossible. And then knock, knock, knock. The sound rattled through the front door. 3 sharp taps. I froze. On the camera, the version of me outside didn't knock. He just stood there, smiling. But now the knocking came again. This time from the back door. Knock, knock, knock. And then the freezer door creaked open. The store's landline rang. Sharp. Piercing. Again. 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 I hesitated, but every ring felt like it was getting closer, louder, vibrating through my skull. I picked up. Mark. The voice on the other end was mine. You're running out of time. Static crackled through the line, swallowing the words like they were being dragged underwater. You have to stay. You promised you'd stay. Who are you? I whispered. Silence. Then the voice returned, quieter now, almost sad. I used to be you. I knew what I had to do next. I didn't want to, but something in me knew that this started in the freezer. I stepped out of the office. The aisles were silent. Too silent. The sound of my own footsteps echoed like they belonged to someone else. I reached the frozen food aisle. The freezer door was still open. The cold air hit me like a wall, but it didn't feel normal. It felt like stepping into something older than cold. Inside, it was empty. No frozen meals. No shelves. Just darkness. And at the back, a staircase. Going down. I swallowed the rising panic and stepped inside. The stairs creaked under my weight. The air grew thicker with every step. The smell hit me first, old metal, sweat, and something that had been dead for a long time. At the bottom was a small, windowless room. Bare concrete walls. And in the center, a chair. Straps on the arms and legs. A camera mounted in the corner. Pointed directly at the chair. And on the wall opposite me. A mirror. But when I looked into it, I wasn't alone. He was there. The other me. The reflection didn't copy my movements. It just watched me. The same sick grin from the cameras stretched across its face. I turned to look behind me, no one was there. But in the mirror, he stood right behind me. "You're not supposed to be down here," it whispered from inside the glass. "You broke the loop." I stumbled back, as locked on the reflection. "What loop?" I demanded. The grin widened. "You don't remember? You asked to stay. You begged not to leave." The room shuddered. The walls rippled like water. Suddenly, flashes of memories, not mine, but close enough to feel like they were. Me strapping myself into the chair. The figure in the freezer whispering promises of peace and safety. A voice, my own, saying over and over, "I'll stay. Just let me stay." The truth hit me. I hadn't been trapped here by force. I chose this. Whatever nightmare this was, I asked for it. Because leaving meant facing something even worse. The figure in the mirror leaned closer, its voice a hiss in my ear. "You can go back, Mark. But you'll remember why you stayed." The glass cracked. I turned toward the staircase. The door at the top was open now, a faint light spilling through. I could leave. I could get out. But deep down I knew. If I left, I would remember what I came here to forget. Why I stayed. And that terrified me more than anything else in this place. The glass shattered like ice under pressure. The cracks raced across the mirror in jagged veins, distorting the reflection of the room. But not the figure behind me. His image remained untouched. Perfect. Grinning. Watching. I turned to run. The door at the top of the stairs was wide open, spilling faint white light into the oppressive blackness of the basement. My chest tightened. My legs screamed to move. But the voice from the mirror followed me. "If you leave, you'll remember." I reached the bottom step, then stopped cold. The staircase was gone. Just gone. In its place was a wall of solid concrete, smooth and unbroken like it had always been there. The light above blinked out. I was trapped again. The air around me shifted. Cold turned to freezing. I could feel the presence behind me, closer now, breathing down my neck without breath. "You always try to run." I spun around. The chair wasn't empty anymore. I was sitting in it. Or at least the version of me that had been here before. His head hung low, wrists bound tight against the arms of the chair. Skin pale, eyes sunken, as if he'd been there for years. But then his eyes snapped open. And they were mine. "Why did you stay?" I whispered. The bound version of me blinked slowly. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then the room changed. The basement faded like mist in the sun. And suddenly, I wasn't in the store anymore. I was in a hospital room. White walls. Machines beeping. The air thick with disinfectant and the faint metallic tang of blood. And lying in the bed, Noah, my son, pale, weak, tubed up to machines keeping him alive. I remember. His tiny voice echoed in my head like a gunshot. I took a shaky step forward. No, this isn't real. But it was. This was the memory I had buried so deep it had created the store. The shift. The figure. All of it. An endless distraction to keep me from remembering this moment. I sat beside his bed, held his small, cold hand. The machine flatlined. One long, endless note. A sound I had tried to drown out for years. The room darkened. The figure appeared again. This time beside me. Its grin faded into something almost sympathetic. "You didn't want to live in that pain, Mark." I squeezed Noah's hand tighter. "You promised me peace. And I gave it to you. But this isn't peace. It's hell." The figure tilted its head. "Isn't forgetting better than remembering this?" I couldn't answer, because a part of me still believed it was. I was back in the chair now, bound, stuck. The screen in front of me showed familiar scenes. The empty aisles, the flickering lights, the figure on the cameras. All of it looping, over and over. I chose this, but now I had to choose again. Stay, and forget, or leave, and carry the truth forever. The figure leaned in close. "One last time, Mark. What's your choice?" I looked at the reflection, at myself trapped, broken, and Noah gone forever. And for the first time, I let the pain in. I tore the straps from the chair. The screens shattered in a burst of light. The figure's face twisted, not in anger, but disappointment. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I whispered. "But at least I'll remember why." The store's lights blinked back on. The front door unlocked. The air smelled like dust and old coffee, like nothing had ever happened here at all. I walked out into the dawn, the sun rising over the empty parking lot. No figure behind me, no whispers in the dark. Just the weight of the memory, the unbearable truth I couldn't escape anymore, and the freedom that came with finally remembering. The sun was rising when I stepped out of Bill's Market. The parking lot was empty, bathed in soft gold and pale blue. No shadows stalked behind me. No whispers echoed in my head. The nightmare was over, or so I told myself. The drive back was silent. No traffic on the road, no music on the radio. Just the sound of the tires rolling over the asphalt and my own shallow breathing. I pulled into my driveway as the sun crept higher, painting everything in that fragile, early morning light. The house was exactly as I left it, unmoved, untouched. But when I stepped inside, something was off. The air was too still, the silence too loud. And there, on the coffee table, a single photo. Me, Emma, Noah, smiling like everything had been perfect, like none of it had ever happened. But the longer I stared at it, the more it felt wrong. The edges of the picture blurred, like it was caught between being real and being remembered wrong. I tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come. I sat on the edge of my bed, eyes locked on the bedroom door. And then, at 4:47 a.m., the same time Noah had flatlined. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp taps. Not from the front door. From inside the house. I froze. The knock came again. This time from the hallway. Soft footsteps followed. Dragging. Slow. I forced myself to stand, moving toward the door. The wood felt cold beneath my fingers. I opened it. The hallway was empty. But on the floor, near Noah's room, a trail of wet footprints, leading toward his door. 5:03 a.m., the room I couldn't enter. I hadn't opened Noah's room since the night I lost him. But now the door stood slightly ajar. The footprints ended there, pooling just outside like whoever left them had gone inside. I pushed the door open. The room was untouched. The same scattered toys, the same little race car bed, the same blue nightlight in the corner. Except, the nightlight was on. I hadn't turned it on. And drawn on the wall just above the bed, in thick black strokes, stay. The same word that had haunted me in the store. The same deal I'd made to forget. I turned toward the mirror on Noah's dresser. And I saw him. Not Noah. The figure. Standing behind me. Closer than before. But now he wasn't smiling. He looked tired. Sad. Like he was waiting for me to understand something I didn't want to face. I blinked. The figure was gone. But etched into the glass now. With those same long, jagged strokes. You left. But I didn't. The sun was fully up now. The house was bright. Normal. But the weight in my chest told me the truth. I never really left. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands. They looked normal. But my reflection in the window wasn't moving. It just watched me. Like it was waiting for me to forget again. Like it knew the loop was still there, waiting to start over. I reached for the photo on the table. The one of me, Emma, and Noah. The smiles weren't smiles anymore. They were stretched too wide. Their eyes too empty. And then I remembered something I'd buried deeper than anything else. I hadn't just stayed to forget the pain. I stayed because I was the one who crashed the car. The accident wasn't fate. It was me. The guilt I couldn't live with. The memory I couldn't survive. Knock, knock, knock. This time I didn't hesitate. I stood up, opened the door, and there he was. Not the figure. Not Noah. Me. The version of me who never left the loop. The version who stayed behind to forget. And he smiled. Time to start again.